welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. Now, back in episode 254, I talked about the benefits of full self expression. And today I'm going to add on to that episode and talk about how to live your voice, how to live a life that's fully self expressed. So, we're moving from theory and philosophy into more practical application. So, how can we implement this into our life? So, first, let's talk about what it means to be fully self expressed. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and wishing you had said what you really meant, or frustrated that somebody didn't understand your point? Have you ever had a meeting at work and then you get up from the meeting and then you go find a colleague and you tell them what you really wanted to say in the meeting, but you just didn't have the nerve to? Whatever, or maybe you spoke your truth and afterwards you wish you had expressed it differently, or you spoke your truth and you were terrified and you said, okay, that was scary, I'm never going to do that again. Most of us think self-expression is speaking up, and that can be true. And what I invite you to explore is living your voice has much less to do with talking, even though I'm a talker, and much more to do with living in alignment with who you really are. And we're exploring what it means to be fully self-expressed, not just through words, but through our choices, our agreements and boundaries, our curiosity, and even when we don't say anything at all. Because what I can tell you for sure is when you implement these practices into your life, this is a practice, okay? This is a practice. We work on this and we get good over time. When we practice these, life becomes a superhighway. We get what we want more easily. There's less conflict. We can navigate difficult situations and it doesn't keep us up at night. We have a higher temperature or tolerance for conflict. We can navigate things that we in the past we thought were impossible. We don't feel like a victim to circumstance being pushed around with everyone else's whim, because we don't know how to advocate for what we really want. So let's talk about first the cost of holding back. Let's talk about the ways we filter ourselves. That can look like people pleasing, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, wanting to be liked. We all want to be liked. It's okay. And we have professional masks that we put on and the family roles that we have. All of these things hold us back from full self-expression. When we are, filtering who we are, doing things we don't want to do, not asking for what we want because we're afraid of rejection, not saying our piece or speaking our truth because we're afraid of conflict, because we want to be liked, we tend to then feel that we are in a constant battle with ourselves and other people. And every time we consistently express our truth, we create distance between who we are. Sorry, let me start again. Every time we consistently suppress our truth, we create distance between who we are and how we want to show up. And living life fully expressed is narrowing as close as possible who we are and how we show up. And that's truly what people are attracted to. And this almost becomes a superpower. Like I said, you navigate through life much more easily because you know how to ask for what you want and you don't feel like you are a victim to whims. Your schedule blows up because a board member calls, or you have to get involved in things you don't want to be involved with because you don't know how to say no. So let's talk about what self-expression is. And first, I'm going to tell you that it is more than speaking. I know I'm Courageous Communication. That's my company, right? That I love the words. I love that idea. And also, that's not all of it. It's one piece of it. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about self-expression is that it's about finding your voice. And I think we express ourselves all the time, but it's way more than our voice. So the question is, what are we expressing? We express our thoughts to so much more than our voice. First is our choices. Every decision we make communicates something. every opportunity we pursue, every relationship we invest in, the invitations we accept, the invitations we decline. Sometimes the most authentic expression isn't a conversation, it's a decision. Not just how we show up, but where we show up. We're constantly communicating and we're constantly expressing. And it's one way that it shows up is in our choices. The other way it shows up is in our agreements and our boundaries. Now, agreements are things we want to have happen. Boundaries are things we don't want to have happen. They're both valid. I like to work with agreements because I like to focus on what I do want instead of what I don't want. And I've done plenty of work, and there's lots of podcasts about boundaries and agreements that you can look on my website and find if you want to do a deeper dive into that. But for right now, that brief definition will lead us through this part of this segment of the podcast. Boundaries are one of the clearest forms of self-expression, right? Because it says, this matters to me, this doesn't matter to me. This is what I am available for, this is what I'm no longer available for, right? It says, this is the line, you're not crossing it. But an agreement is, hey, this is what I do want. So if I don't want to be interrupted all day long, that's a boundary. But an agreement would be, hey, an agreement is, could we agree that we have open office time between 1 and 2 every day, and you're free to come and talk with me about whatever you have. That way you don't feel like you're constantly getting interrupted. That's your boundary. But then we have an agreement, because if I don't want to be interrupted, what do I want, right? So this is a form of self-expression. Our agreements and our boundaries say what we value, what we don't value, what we want more of, what we want less of, what we're available for, what we're not available for. The next way our expression shows up is through our creativity. Creativity is something inside you that you give form to. So this is expression, and it could be painting, writing, if you like home decorating. Even my friend loves like secondhand thrift shopping. These are things that are part of self-expression. Even building your business, cooking dinner, raising kids. Creativity is something inside you that you're giving form to. And I think we often narrow creativity to creative, what we think is creative, painting, drawing, something like that. But everything that's in us that comes outside of us is self-expression through the form of creativity. Now, I like to cook. I never liked to cook for a long time because I didn't want to follow a recipe. I thought that was super boring. And also, what I realized is you could just make it up. Once you understand the basics of cooking, you can kind of dive in from there. And so I really learned a lot about cooking, but because once I learned the basics and I realized, I can look at all these ideas and kind of just make it up where I want it to go. It was so funny during COVID, and my family and I would Zoom every week, and we'd all talk about what we watched or what we ate, because we weren't going anywhere, and those were the only two things to talk about. And they would say, what did you make? And I'd say, I made this thing or whatever, and it was so good. How'd you make it? I don't know. I have to think about it, because I was just kind of making it up. And I didn't realize you could do that. So that was creative expression for me that I didn't even realize was a self-expression. I also really like to feed people. And so that's one of my, love languages is feeding people. So that was part of my expression, is that is something inside me that takes form that I can share with other people. The other way our expression shows up is in our presence. And I say this all the time. Energy speaks louder than words. Energy speaks louder than words. So long before we speak, people experience us. They experience our energy, our attention, our listening, and our ability to create safety. And sometimes your presence communicates more than words ever could. And what I see sometimes is people not really conscious of this. How you walk into the room, how you show up during the day. Even how you sit in a meeting or how you sit on your Zoom. Those communicate things, right? That's expression, and your presence is an expression. And consciously cultivating your presence is something that the people I coach and train and I work with, we work on, because I know it speaks louder than words. What is it? They might not remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So your presence is something that our energy, our attention, our listening, and our ability to create safety and acceptance, that is expression, and people will react to that. The other way our expression comes out is in what we tolerate. So, what we continually tolerate communicates what we're willing to accept to others, to ourselves. And sometimes the most powerful self expression isn't speaking a truth, it's refusing to continue betraying one. And I'm going to let that land. Sometimes the most powerful self expression isn't speaking a truth, it's refusing to continue betraying one. So, what are you tolerating? What are you accepting that is not in alignment with who you are? I'll give you a tiny example so you can see how this works in your life. One of my clients that I worked for a while, they wound up being kind of grandfathered into doing all of these Zoom sessions. And it was taking up a lot of their time. It was way out of alignment with their skill set. And they didn't really know how to negotiate out of this. But they were continually tolerating this and having to work long hours and show up at difficult times because they had been sort of handed this role and didn't know how to get out of it. And so what we were working on is to stop tolerating that and actually stand in the sovereignty of your skills and navigating a better solution to that. So when we decide enough is enough, I take my power back, I deserve better, that's when we create our lived expression and our alignment, which means who we are and how we show up, that gap closes. So think about what you tolerate, because that is expression. Okay, let's move on. We're going to walk into segment 3 now, which is sometimes the most powerful expression isn't an opinion. And I love this because I work with this all the time. Sometimes the most powerful expression is not what you're thinking. We often assume that if someone asks a question, we owe them an answer. If someone shares an opinion, we should share ours, or we should have a thought about that opinion. If someone tells us a problem, we should fix it or solve it. But what if that is not true? One of the greatest gifts and one of the best skills you can have is we can give the other person the experience of feeling fully heard. And sometimes the most authentic response isn't an answer, it's curiosity. And I just love this because this is so powerful. Because when somebody says something, and I've practiced this my whole life, you know, my kids are adopted. When they were little, people would say crazy things to us and ask us crazy questions. And I learned that I don't owe anyone an answer. And even when somebody makes a comment, I don't have to comment back. So what you can do is, instead of saying something back, you can say, oh, that's so interesting. Help me understand what you mean by that. Tell me more about that. What makes you say that? Can you say more about that? What was that like for you? So this does a couple of things. First of all, people relax. They feel seen and heard. They feel centered. And the second thing is, if somebody says something like odd or inappropriate or something, it gives your time to breathe and a chance to regulate your nervous system a little bit. And the third thing is, sometimes after listening, you don't realize you need to offer an opinion. So I'm going back to COVID again. I don't know why, but this is a story that a friend said to me. Are you afraid of getting COVID? This was very early days, right? And I said, I'm not sure. What makes you ask that? And he launched into a story about some colleagues who were, even though they were masked at work, he felt like his colleagues were like going out a lot on the weekends and doing things that he felt were unsafe, and maybe bringing that into his work. That's the story he wanted to share. The question he asked was a bid, right? He wanted to discuss something. And a lot of times people will want to discuss something, and they'll broach the topic in the form of a question. We want to answer that question, but you don't actually have to answer the question. I'll give you another one that just came up the other day. A woman that I coach said there was in a board meeting, and a board member, and raise your hand because I know you've been through this. The board member said, "Oh, I went to this gala and they raised all this money. We should do this gala." And instead of responding to that with like, "Oh, great, how many, that you think I can really handle a gala," or feeling like you have to have a gala or making some excuse or whatever, you don't have to do that at all. All you have to do is say, "Oh, that's so interesting. Tell me more about that. What did you love about that gala? What did you love about that party?" And through those questions, right, you can sort of make people make things go away. Because if the person said, "Oh, it felt so good," and da da da, yeah, okay, that's great. I love that you really felt connected to the mission. Um, I'd love to explore, what would that look like for the gala we're already having. You can really make things go away this way. It is truly, truly magical, and it's like a win-win because you don't have to respond, and they get to ask a question. You don't have to argue or respond, and they feel seen and heard. And usually, whatever it is, it kind of just makes it go away. Okay, let's talk about the 4 ways we express ourselves: what we say, what we ask, what we choose not to say, and what we do. So, silence isn't the absence of self expression. Sometimes it's the highest expression of discernment. Because living your voice isn't about having something to say about everything. It's not about solving or fixing every problem. It's not about making sure everybody in the room knows how you feel. It's about intentionally choosing how you want to show up. So if you think about what we say, what we ask, what we choose not to say, and what we do, that is how we express ourselves. So in choosing not to say anything, that's okay too. We don't have to respond. I had a client once who got an email and there was some opinion in the email that she did not agree with. And she said the old me would have gone, hit reply, and da 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 da, and spent like an hour trying to argue with what was going on with this. And she said it was such a relief to just let that comment go. I didn't really have to say anything. And the point here is the discernment, the intention. I choose what I want to respond to. I'm not bound to respond to because I'm conscious about how I want to show up and what I want to say. Okay, I'm jamming and going through this one. But now let's talk about the 7 steps to living fully expressed. We're going to walk through a framework here, okay? And if you know anything about my coaching and training, you know that we work from the inside out here, people. So no surprise how this framework is going to start. Number 1, notice where you're withholding. So the awareness of I want to say something and I don't know how, or I wish I could say it and I didn't, or I got, tongue-tied or whatever. Awareness is perfect because it's awareness before action. And don't worry if you didn't say anything. Don't worry. Just notice it. It's information. Everything is information. Isn't that interesting? I didn't say what I wanted. Isn't that interesting? I kind of was maybe a little, I didn't know how to handle it. So I sort of flew off a little bit. That's interesting information. The second, and this is so important, is to ground yourself before responding. We want to respond instead of react. A reaction comes from the nervous system. It comes from the subconscious. It comes from a place of fear, right? Our nervous system is designed to keep us safe. And so it comes from a place of needing safety and needing protection. We don't have to respond. And one of the things I mentioned before when I talked about you don't have to answer everything is when you have a comment like that, when you have a comment that's like, what do you help me understand that? What makes you say that? It allows you to start to regulate your nervous system, even just catch your breath a little bit. Because I know sometimes you feel like you need to respond in the moment. You always don't have as much time as you would like. And also, you probably have more time than you think. So respond instead of reacting. You don't have to hit reply and send that email as soon as you get it. Maybe you can sit on that overnight. If somebody comes to you with a problem, you don't have to react right away. You can say, let me think about this and get back to you in the morning, because you want to give your chance for your nervous system to regulate. When I work with my son and all my kids really, before we did anything around consequences or discipline, it was, am I regulated? Is he regulated? Because if that nervous system is going crazy, you're not going to get anything in. And so we want to ground ourselves before responding. Even if it's grounding ourselves for 30 seconds in the moment, but too often we're just reacting, we're not responding. So we're going to ground ourselves so we can give a response, not a reaction. Number 3 is check the timing. Not every truth needs immediate expression. Sometimes wisdom is waiting. And I alluded to this in number 2 in grounding yourself. But not, we can find the time. And when you look around the room and say, is this a good time to give this feedback? Is this a good time to say this? I had a dispute with a friend, and there was something that I wanted to say, but I purposely waited until I felt like it was a good time to have a meaningful conversation, because in the charge of it, it is not going to be meaningful. And we can take the time to process. And I have a sheet that I give everyone that I work with about giving and receiving feedback, and one of the things is like, is this a good time? Is there a better time? Is it maybe it's you're pulling somebody aside, maybe you're waiting an hour to get some perspective. Number 4, and I think this is the most important for me, it's just we seek to understand first. In influence, right? When I'm a value to you, you're a value to me. I can't meet your needs until I know what they are. So influence begins with curiosity, always. People are more open to hearing what we've said when we feel like we understand them. So those questions that I said to you before, help me understand, tell me more. What's the most important about this? What's the most important to you about this? They create connection so that communication can happen. Connection before communication. The more people feel seen and heard, the more likely they are to listen to you. And I go through this all the time. This is a huge part of my work. That's why we don't pitch. That's why we don't sell. That's not we don't push, because we are here to seek to understand. And when people feel seen, heard, and understood, a lot of what they're conflicted about, a lot of what a dispute could be about, kind of fades away. And I've done this intuitively my whole life. I didn't realize I was doing it until I had coaches and people who taught me to be a better communicator. And I realized, I was naturally, intuitively doing this. But it is a great skill to have. And I know you want people to see your way. I know you want people to do what you want. And I get that can be frustrating. My husband, and he... in his work, he's like, I just want you to do what I want you to do. And I understand that sometimes you're the boss and you get to say that. And other times, it really helps to seek to understand first. Because once they feel seen and heard, they are more likely to listen to you. Because they have trust, right? Trust creates connection. Connection creates communication. Okay, number 5, express what's true. My coach, Michelle, would call this speak the unspoken. Speak clearly, speak kindly, speak courageously. And you can do this, again, in how you broach a subject, which is, help me understand. Tell me more about that. What makes you say that? Tell me more about that. Because we're not here to win, not to convince, not to control, but to live with integrity within ourselves. So when you say something like, hey, and you can say this after you've gone through the seen what's true for them, you can say, could I share what's true for me? Would it be okay if I shared a little bit of where this is coming from? Anytime I give somebody wisdom, I say this, listen, I'm going to share what feels true for me. You can tell me to F right off if it's not right for you, because everyone has sovereignty over their choices, right? But I'm going to speak clearly, speak kindly, and speak courageously. I'm not here to win. I'm not here to convince. I'm not here to control, but to live with integrity within myself. Here's what's true for me. It doesn't have to be what's true for you. I just chatted with a colleague, and she gave a story of how an organization that she worked with had a change of leadership, and she didn't really agree with how that how that went down, and she pulled back from the organization. She's liking some of the moves they're making now, but but she spoke clearly and kindly and courageously, saying, "Hey, I'm not loving how this was handled." She didn't need to win. She didn't need to convince anybody. She just wanted them to know here's where she was at, so she could live with integrity within herself, and also so they could understand. Right? I think the most important thing is to live with integrity within yourself, but also if a donor ghosts you, or she sponsors this event every year and she didn't this year, and everybody's wondering why, they don't have to wonder. She clearly and confidently said, here's what's going on with me. This is only my truth. It doesn't have to be your truth. Number 6, practice sovereignty. You don't have to respond to everything. You don't have to explain every decision. You don't have to convince everyone. Sometimes we just choose not to engage. And when I talk about sovereignty, I mean you have sovereignty over your choices. You don't have to justify your choices. You don't have to respond to everything or explain every decision. And that's why those phrases are so helpful, because it really puts the questioning back on the questioner instead of you, right? When I was talking about like hitting reply and da 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 da, she didn't. She let it go. She was practicing sovereignty. She doesn't have to explain everything. And I think we tend to over-explain. We tend to over-respond because we want to show up in a certain way as smart and competent and capable. And we think if we do that, that's what we're expressing. But I think it's actually the opposite. The more that we can have sovereignty and we decide when it's important, the more confident we come across and the more influence that we have. Number 7, and this is the last one, and you know this one, is live in alignment. Expression is an event. Again, it's a practice. This isn't a one-time thing. This is a practice. Every day, your words, choices, agreements, boundaries, curiosity, and actions, every day you practice this, they become a little more aligned with who you truly are. And you feel like who you are and how you show up are as close as possible. And so when you start living in alignment and practicing this every day, I swear, life becomes a super highway. I'm going to walk through the 7 real quick just for you to have them. Number 1, notice where, number 1 is, oh gosh, notice where you're withholding. Number 2, ground yourself before responding. Number 3, check your timing. Number 4, seek to understand first. Number 5, express what's true for you. Number 6, practice sovereignty. And number 7, live in alignment. When you practice this, you will get a new perspective, and perspective changes everything. And you feel like you are 10,000 feet up looking down. You're an observer, not a detached observer. It's not that you're not engaged. You're just receiving all the information, and things around you don't have to live inside you. They don't have to be in your body, in your nervous system. They can just live around you. And when a couple of months ago, when I had a retreat here and I took my clients to the top of the arch, which by the way terrified me, and I've been to the arch like 10 times, and the guy was like, "Oh, is it your first time in the arch?" I'm like, "Oh no, been up here my whole life." I even have a tattoo of the arch on my arm. I just couldn't even move, but that's okay. And the purpose of going up in there, even though it terrified me, was what looks different from above, what problems feel smaller, and what truth becomes clearer. It's like if you've ever looked at the ocean, and you look at the ocean and you think about everything that's on the water and everything that's below the surface, and you get a new perspective, right? It shifts your perspective. And so this is all about perspective shifting, because sometimes we don't need a new answer. We just need a new perspective. Sometimes it's just a different way of telling the story or looking at the problem, right? The new perspective is I don't have to be interrupted all day. I can actually navigate my day. I can have autonomy and sovereignty over my schedule. I can speak my truth in a way that people receive it. Um, so we create new perspectives. So let's walk into this. Here's some reflective questions. Like, where am I holding back? That's a great first question to start with. What truth wants expression that's currently not being expressed? Where do I need more courage? Where do I need more curiosity? When am I speaking where I should be listening? Where am I reacting when I could pause? And what would the fully expressed version of me choose next? And that, I think, is the best question, is what would the fully expressed version of me choose next? I'm going to walk through those questions real quickly one more time so you can have them. Where am I holding back? What truth wants expression? Where do I need more courage? Where do I need more curiosity? Where am I speaking when I should be listening? Where am I reacting when I could be pausing? And what would the fully expressed version of me choose next? In closing, living your voice isn't about talking more, talking louder. It isn't about saying everything you think or making sure you get everyone to agree with you. It's about closing the gap between who you are on the inside and how you show up on the outside. Sometimes it means speaking. Sometimes it means asking a better question. Sometimes it means setting a boundary. Sometimes it means not saying nothing at all. Because full self-expression isn't measured by the number of words you speak. It's measured by how intentionally your life reflects who you truly are. One final thought. Lifting your voice isn't about finding the courage to speak. It's about finding the wisdom to choose how you'll show up. And I hope you receive this wisdom and you can more intentionally choose, understand how you show up, how you express yourself matters. And when you intentionally choose the powerful lived expression that's in alignment with who you are, the more powerful you become, the better leader you become, a better parent, friend, spouse, board member, whoever it is you will become, and you will be more productive because of it, and you will do more with your day, which is what we're here to do. So, man, mic drop. That was this episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I love you. I care about you. Keep doing the work. If you want to talk with me more about how to live a fully self-expressed life, I am happy to talk with you. My link is always in the bio. Please book a time with me. And until then, I'll see you next time on The Influential Nonprofit.